Okay, good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the show. As always, you know, the BTM Club is raising the bar and bringing you inspirational people in the community. Well, I think today we've surpassed ourselves with His Royal Highness, Mr. Rudolph Walker. Welcome.
Well, thank you. What an introduction. It's kind of humbling experience. Just Rudolph Walker, pleased to meet you, full stop.
Let me tell you now, there's nothing just about you. There is nothing just about Rudolph Walker. But thank you for taking time to come and speak with us here at the BTM Club.
It's a pleasure, it really is.
It really is a pleasure and an honor for us because, number one, I have to say, I've been following you and your career for as long as I can remember because my father is also Trinidadian.
All right.
So Rudolph Walker, when we saw him on television, literally from 60s, 70s, we had to stand to attention and salute the television because that was not only royalty on television, but Trini royalty. So, you know, and I like that you have Trini iPad there. So,
well, I'll accept the Trini. I ain't so sure about the royalty part.
Yes. Well, it's great to see you and great to see you looking wonderfully well, defying your years because I remember the 80th birthday party.
That's right.
At the Hackney Empire.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So nobody would look at this gentleman here and think that he's the age that he is. I tell you, you're doing very well. But
well, I got to thank the old man up there for that.
Absolutely, absolutely. We all do. We all do. But yes, I would love to hear the Rudolph journey because, as I say, we're always bringing inspirational people and people like yourselves. When we saw you on television, we, as I said, wanted to stand to attention because when your face came on screen, you know, there weren't many Black people on television in positive roles in those days. Mm-hmm. And yeah, you know, you're one of those that we aspired to, and not that there's anything wrong with driving buses or trains, but, you know, people like you, we looked at and thought, you know, we've got options too.
Of course.
You made us realize that we had options. So I would like to start the journey from Trinidad. Where did you grow up?
Well, I grew up in a place called San Juan.
Okay, San Juan.
When I say San Juan, I know the very English people or so-called special Trinidadians would say San Juan.
That's right, yeah.
But I was born in San Juan.
Okay.
And I many years ago. I mean, you alluded to it by saying 80 years. Well, I'm coming up to 82.
Okay.
I went to the usual things, schooling. It was infant school, which I have a kind of vaguely fond memory of because of the teacher who was in charge, Mrs. Morton.
Right.
Who was a kind of extended member of the family. And the last thing you want is for someone who is to be extended member of your family teaching you.
Exactly.
Because the discipline was kind of extra. You know, I had
and
to say,
everything reported home.
Of course. So you had, even at the age of 5, I think 5 and 6, you had to set an example.
Yeah.
And fortunately, she lived long enough to, when I made a trip down to Trinidad and took my son down there, he was he was 5 at the time. And he saw what she was like, even at 5. You know, she lifted him in her arms, and it was a surreal moment. It was quite moving moment to see that happen. So yes, and primary school is where, infant school is where it all started, in the theatre.
In the theatre, as early as that?
Well, it's as early as that because the story goes that at the end of the year, when we have, Christmas concerts,
Right.
When as 5-year-olds and 6-year-olds, you perform, you say various things, 2 lines of a poem or 3 lines of a poem, and all your parents and your family and friends were there, and magicians would turn up. And apparently I would ask that Miss Morton, can I have something extra to do? Just 1 line or 2 lines just wasn't enough.
Okay.
So that's a story she told for many years, how I started. So I went from there to elementary school, or Barrie EC school as it's called. I think it's equivalent to your comprehensive school.
Right. Okay.
And I joined once again at a very early age. I think it must have been about 7 or 8. I saw the senior kids performing at their Christmas show and their pantomime, or what we call pantomime.
And thinking, I want a piece of that.
I want a piece of that. So I was the youngest member in the class, in the drama group.
But it's very true that one of the most impressionable people in your life, apart from your parents, of course, is a good teacher, or are good teachers.
Yes. What you mean about people who influence me?
Yeah, influence you, people who influenced you, encouraged you, disciplined you. And, you kind of look up to the teachers that really invested in you.
Oh, gosh, yes. My mother, at a later stage, when I said I wanted to come away, to further my career in the theatre, she said, no, you have a good job in the UK, in Trinidad. Why do you want to leave Trinidad and go to England? But yes, my teachers at the time were very encouraging. In fact, so much so that the person who ran the drama group, Mr. Dyer, I think at the time, whenever there was another teacher, Miss Franklin, when they were unable to take rehearsals or classes, asked me, who's one of the youngest member in the group, to stay in after school and do rehearsals. So there I am at the age of 13, 14, directing the 15 and 16-year-old kids in rehearsals, and had my own drama group outside of the school at the age of 14, 15.
So drama, acting, theatre was really in you from a young age without it even being prompted. It was just something that you felt.
Yeah, but I also loved cricket. I was the opening bat for my school. I played a lot of cricket. And one of the teachers said to me, why not take it seriously? Because you could go on to represent Trinidad. And who knows?
Really?
But, to me, I was just having fun after school.
Yeah.
And, the excitement of beating another school and having to run like hell because because we shouldn't have beaten them,
And they now want to beat you.
Boys, the story behind that, I was the opening bat. So there was an advantage if we are batting, if we are batting second.
Right.
So they made the runs. I opened the batting, made a few runs, and I made sure I didn't hang around to see if we won or not, because if we won, I didn't want to be the last leaving the ground.
That's a good one. I like that. You beat them and they're ready to beat you, so you have to run.
Yeah, especially when we there was a particular area in near San Juan, in Movant and Laventille, where we are playing the schools there, and it's on a hill.
Yeah, Laventille.
So it means that when you finish playing cricket, you got to walk down this hill. So there are boys on either side of the hill throwing stones at you. So, brother, I became one of the fastest kids escaping from a cricket match as a youngster.
And it probably helped you with your cricket runs too.
Something like that.
Extra training.
It was a lot of fun. It was a lot of fun.
So have you got siblings?
Yes, I have two younger sisters.
Right.
One is in America, one is over here.
Okay.
None of them went into the business. My one sister over here, Veronica, she went into nursing.
Okay.
And became a mental health nurse. And my other sister went to America and was part of the army because her husband, who was Trinidadian, was in the army.
Right. So that's what I was trying to establish. If you were the only artistic, creative one in the family.
Yeah, only that I discovered many years later that one of the things that my mother wanted to do, she had dreams of going to America. An aunt of hers was supposed to send for her because she was very interested in dancing.
Right.
And but it never materialized. But what I vaguely remember is that my mother would get together with one or two of her friends. I wouldn't be around, or I might just hear it, playing outside, and they would sometimes just read poems and do things like that. Now, maybe indirectly that had some sort of influence, but I was never totally aware of her thing. She followed me as a youngster when I had my drama shows. She would be there supporting, make my costumes when the school had their annual Christmas shows or pantomime. We all had to make our own costumes. So mother was very eager and very happy to do all the sewing for that. So yes, but no one, and a cousin of mine who, late Pat Bishop, who turned out to be one of the most fantastic pianists and band arranger, steel band arranger, and very high in the music world in Trinidad and the UK and throughout the world. So those are the only links that I am aware of as far as, the arts concerned.
So you were saying that your mother had a dream of being a dancer and going to the States, but she didn't fulfill that dream.
Yeah, that's right. And this is something that I discovered later on in life.
Right.
But as I said, sadly, she was always there to support me.
Right. Now, this is the interesting thing because, as you know, a lot of Black families, especially of a certain generation, they didn't really encourage or support you going into the arts in that way. They somehow had a feeling that you need to have a regular job, a proper job, So how was that received? You saying, well, I've got this far in Trinidad. I think I've got as far as I can get. I need to go away. How was the whole journey supported? Was it welcomed and supported and encouraged?
Well, it wasn't to start with because, I was brought up only by my mother, single parent family.
Right.
And I got a job with a government printing office. It was a civil service job. And, it's something in Trinidad in those days. You don't frown at that, it's a proper job. But it's
they would say, inverted commas. But, that definition of a proper job is not the same for everybody.
Exactly. Exactly. So when I told my mother that, look, I just want to go abroad and further my career and, build something in the theater. As I said, she said, well, what for? You have a good job here, and why do you want to do it? So let's put it this way, in the early days, she just didn't give me her blessings.
Yeah.
And something changed suddenly. She came home one evening and said, yes, you can go if you want to. Because, in those days, the sort of upbringing I had from my mother, it was very strict.
Right.
And even at the age of 18 and 19, I was still living at home.
Yeah.
Still being, I couldn't go out of the norm.
Yeah.
So in a way, I needed her blessing for her to. And what transpired is that she was on her way home that evening on a bus and overheard a conversation with two women, and one saying that they regretted not letting their son emigrate to America.
Right.
And the other one saying almost the same thing. And they, in a way, they regretted it. So as soon as she came home, she said, "You have my blessings."
Right. And you felt then you were free to go.
Oh, yeah.
But, and the thing is, it's quite possibly that not only was the conversation between those two ladies the impetus to make her come home to say to you, well, yes, you can go. But also she was probably thinking of what she had once hoped to do and didn't pursue.
Just possibly. Yes, that is, I never thought of that. But yes, that could easily be in the equation.
Yeah.
But the thing is that it wasn't, the strange thing, it wasn't supported by a lot of my friends around. Yes, they loved the fact that I was in a theater in Trinidad. I had my own company, and I was with one of the leading theater companies in Trinidad. I was part of the late Derek Walcott theater workshop. I was one of his founder members.
Right.
So, building a reputation in the theater in Trinidad was very much there. But to me, it just wasn't enough. I had to explore.
Yeah. And I think it's even when I go back to the West Indies, to Trinidad, Barbados, where my parents are from, and you realize that the Barbados and Trinidad that you're going to now is not where they grew up.
Exactly.
So, the opportunities that were there or are there now weren't there at the time. And if your mind was such that you felt, I need to pursue something more than I can achieve here, you had to leave.
I had to
get out.
And also even going back now and seeing the theater and what they're doing. Yes, they're doing some good things, but it is still, I needed to be challenged. I needed to be on international stage. I needed to, I needed bigger challenges. And
than you could get down there as much as you loved Trinidad, Yeah. So when you came to England, how did it start for you here? How was it?
It was tough then.
A culture shock as well, I'm sure.
If I tell people it is still tough.
Yeah, absolutely.
Challenges are still there even in 2021. But yes, when I came, I was faced with, the usual thing in 1960. It's been said and documented so many times.
Yeah.
And you really weren't accepted.
Yeah.
That's the bottom line. Regardless of whether you were in the arts or wherever you were, you can just about get away with it in the arts to a certain degree within the theater. But you felt as though you were on the outside looking in. And the odd door would open for you to put a toe in or a finger in, and you have to use your chisel or whatever format that chisel is to prise it open.
Yeah. And the thing is, too many people tell the same tale for it to be overlooked and pretend that it wasn't so or it didn't happen. It was exactly so. You were coming to try to get into something. Number one, you weren't accepted. And it was all about knocking down doors, breaking glass ceilings, and a fight, a constant fight.
Oh, yes. It there is no two ways about it. And in those early days, we were faced with a problem that as an actor, as a Black actor, the parts were few and far between anyhow.
Yeah.
But they had this policy that you can only get a part if it is specifically written for a Black actor.
Yeah.
You couldn't see a script and say, oh, I could play that part. No. It had to be mentioned.
Specifically a Black person.
Yeah. He is a Black, I wouldn't say a Black doctor because that was few and far between.
Yeah.
But even a black road sweeper or black nurse or whatever it is.
The title was preceded with black, and then
Of course,
it was for you.
it was
Yeah.
for me. So that in itself was a challenge. And of course, there are few writers around who would even write that. So
Right.
you
see, from what you're saying, it is challenge upon challenge, because not only are they putting their limitations on you, so you see a script and you think, well, with my training and my experience and my talent, I could play this, but it wasn't even open to you. It wasn't even an option to let you read for it, or, you know.
Yes, and that was one aspect. And when you do turn up for an interview, when you get through the door and you find, when you arrive, we used to call it the cattle market, because you turn up for one particular part. It might be whatever. It might be an intern. It might be something in a hospital series. And you turn up and you walk into a room and there are about 20 or 30 actors like yourself.
Yeah.
From dancers, and I'm not kidding, it was dancers, people who genuinely in the theaters, actors, you know, there were musicians. And you ask yourself, well, why am I competing with a guy who is a dancer?
Yeah, because I've come as an actor to read a part.
Yeah.
But, you know, I guess it was such that the desperation for this one part, everybody turned up, and with fingers, legs, and everything, eyes crossed, hoping they'd get it, you know?
Yeah. And when, and you, not only that you also face the possibility or the being told by a director, well, we would love to offer you this part, Mr. Walker, but you're not experienced enough. So where do you get the experience? I mean,
if you don't give me the opportunity. But even that, because, you know, you came with experience. So they don't even recognize the experience that you had prior to being here, because you didn't come as, you know, a novice. You came with experience with your own theater company, but they don't even recognize that because it wasn't here.
But that meant nothing at all. I mean, I joined a very good amateur dramatic group in London called the Mountview Theatre Club. And they had a lot of ex-professionals in there, and also a place called the Stanhope Institute. And again, there were lots of actors or ex-professionals, you know, people who have retired. So I mingled with those actors. But I was so determined to, you know, as the old people say, when one door closes, another one opens. So when they were telling me that, look, you're not experienced enough, I did the most extraordinary. I mean, at the time, I thought it was just one of those things that you do. But I wrote to every single director and producer in the UK, all the theaters, all the television producers and directors, ITV, ATV, BBC, and I sent a photo and all the amateur things that I did, every one of them. So could you imagine, I mean, the money that I spent on postage, number one, and secondly,
and the time to put it together to post it to everybody.
Well, the advantage I had is that I was working during the day in a printry, not far from in Islington. So I was able to impress the boss. I mean, they were fantastic.
Yeah.
You know, really, they were great. It was called the Billington Press.
Right.
And he allowed me, you know, to put together just a kind of a foolscap page that I can turn and have my photo on it and all the little things that I did and what I am capable of doing. So could you imagine when directors arrive at their office on a Monday morning or whatever it is, and suddenly there is this guy who they've never heard of, you know, and about the secretary would Ida Bennett. And I had just one or two respond, which was extraordinary. In spite of all that, I had a response from Malvern Theatre Company. And that ended up by me being invited to play Othello.
Wow.
So once again, as a young...
Determination, tenacity, it has to be commended. And it's funny, you know, you have to look at every little bit of the journey and you realize you couldn't do it on your own, because even your boss that allowed you to put the foolscap paper together with the picture was a part of the journey to you getting to be able to contact the director and be asked to come and play Othello.
Yeah. No, there are lots of incidents like that during the early part of my career.
Yeah.
So the next thing I decided to do was to go out to places like Birmingham and, as I said, Malvern, Worcestershire, other places, and play various parts. You know, there were parts that weren't written for Black actors, but I was out in the sticks, as they said, just gaining experience. But when I returned to London, or when I went for interviews in London, once again, the goalposts changed. Yes, Mr. Walker, you've done that and that, but you know what? We need to get someone from America, someone who is well known. So there again, the goalpost was changed.
Yeah. So
that was the sort of the constant battle that I had in the early days. I mean, it wasn't only me. It was, you know.
And it wasn't only in the acting and arts profession. It was across the board.
Yeah,
across
of course. But, you know, I always adopt my old school motto, perseverance wins.
Well, it certainly does.
Yeah, and I use that even up till today.
Well, I had to use it today with our technology problems earlier. So perseverance wins, and it is true. You know, it's true. So then you went into TV, or were you always doing theater for a while? Because I think our first recollection of you was in Love Thy Neighbor, of course.
Yeah, but prior to that, I did a lot of quality plays. You know, I did a play in the West End, Jamie Jackson. I worked with theater companies, but it was mainly in the theater.
Right.
And I also was fortunate enough before Love Thy Neighbor again to do the Play for Today. You know, we had
Play for Today, yes. Remember
we had live. Come on, you're not that old.
Yes, I am, believe it or not. Like yourself, I'm carrying my age well.
Well done. And 30-minute theater, Wednesday plays. There was a variety in my work.
Right.
Prior to Love Thy
So now
Neighbor.
you were really getting your teeth into it and gaining the experience that they were trying to say you didn't have.
Yeah. And it's not widely known that I appeared in the early episodes of On the Buses.
Yes.
But the story behind that is that after a few episodes, the director, who became a good friend of mine and one of the guys who is no longer with us now, who in a strange sort of way inspired me and helped me along. But he said to me, sorry, Rudy, I have to let you go because the powers that be decided that it's not good for the series. It would spoil their rating. Having me on.
To have a black person on a regular basis.
On the buses. Wow. So if you notice, and as far as I know, there was never a running black character in On the Buses since then.
No, but I remember you in On the Buses, and obviously, as you mentioned earlier, Love Thy Neighbor, and of course, 10 Rillington Place.
Well, yeah, 10.
We see you coming at the end, and we're like, hold on a minute, but that's you know. But back to Love Thy Neighbor. Now, I mean, today, everything that was in that show could never be allowed.
Of course, yes.
And I mean, I'm speaking candidly, and I hope you don't mind. But now they see that the things that they were saying then were politically incorrect. They would never be allowed now. But my thing is, we always knew they were politically incorrect.
Of course.
We always knew they were politically incorrect. And how was that for you? The genuine feeling, playing that part with those lines being spoken, and as you say, them just accepting it as normal conversation, which it was in the 60s and 70s, but we always knew it was inappropriate.
Of course.
How was your feeling as an actor doing, of course, being as professional as ever, but having to grit your teeth and,
No, there was no gritting of teeth whatsoever.
Okay.
I got to make it absolutely clear, and I've said this over and over again. We are talking about the 70s.
Yeah.
We are talking about where those names were being used anyhow. My plus on all of that, and I said this when I was cast, when they went through the whole thing, I said the most important thing for me as an actor is that the Bill Reynolds is not an Uncle Tom.
Yeah.
In other words, if the other character called me a name, I'm going to do exactly the same. If he hit me,
tit for tat. Yeah.
If he punched me, I'll punch him back.
Yeah.
So in other words, we were both stupid. We were both, what it did, it raised, to me, it highlighted the stupidity of racism.
Yeah.
You see, that was my take on it. And don't forget, too, that when Love Thy Neighbor came along, there was no other black character on the screen who stood up for himself. Absolutely none. On a regular basis.
Yeah.
And that reflected when visiting schools. When I went visited organizations, especially black organizations, suddenly that character became a hero.
Because he stood up to it and didn't accept it, and he was defiant to the end. And
yes. Yeah. So, okay, we accept the fact that those were not pleasant words.
Yeah.
But so was my calling him white honky.
Yeah. Yeah.
You see, so was me explaining to him the stupidity of what he is saying anyhow.
Yeah.
So, it's very easy now to sit back and say it was horrendous, it was horrible. And I also go as far as to say, I am here talking to you. I am here visiting schools. I am here trying to help youngsters to give them a certain amount of confidence because of Love Thy Neighbor.
Yeah, that's why you've invited me, because of my role in that and the position I have. Yeah.
Yeah. So let's not, and also I pay homage to and respect to the actors that went before me, even the ones in America who roll their eyes and who we criticize now and say how horrible, roll your eyes. The mamas who in television series or in plays, you know what? What they did opened the doors for me.
For you, it's their shoulders that you stand on.
Of course.
And, of course, the generations to come are standing on yours.
Well, yeah.
Yeah.
So sometimes I say rather than
you're going sideways. Come back to the center.
Yeah. Yeah.
You're going sideways.
I am?
Oh, right. Okay. Now we're back.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And everything is a reflection of the times. So when you're looking at things and films in the 30s and 40s with the train porter and the butler, that's all they could get. But at least they were doing something and opening the doors for the next generation that don't necessarily have to be a butler or the train porter.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Everything is relevant and necessary, and it's just whether you appreciate that or not.
Yeah. I would also add that when I finished with Love Thy Neighbor, when we decided not to do any more, I was offered 1 or 2 parts on television, playing almost the same character, and I bluntly refused.
Yeah.
So even Rudolph Walker in his career was always looking to raise the barrier, to go forward, to do something that is different, something that is, that was uplifting.
Challenging, uplifting, inspirational, and leaves a positive feeling and positive message. And quite rightly, you probably thought, well, you know what? I've done enough Love Thy Neighbor stuff, style stuff. It played its course, which was fine, but it's time to move on.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah.
But then you seem to have disappeared for a few years. Were you doing a lot of theater then? Because you weren't so visible on TV.
No, I wasn't. But yes, for a few years. But I was with the Royal Shakespeare Theatre Company. I did plays with the Royal Shakespeare Theatre Company. I worked in the theatre, and the things were happening in the theatre.
Yeah.
The thing is that when an actor, suppose, when he's involved, first of all, in a television series that is so popular, and even if he appears on television again in a one-off play, it is not that noticeable.
Right.
Or if he's in the theater doing a play, theater goers would recognize who it is.
Yeah.
But the general public, I haven't seen Rudolph for, a year. I haven't seen him for 2 years.
I think the journey always continues in the theater, doesn't it? The theater never stops. It is always going. But, the part on a major TV series will always be the one or the thing that brings you kind of notoriety, because it's all over. Whereas, the play is in the theater in the West End. The people in London will see it, or people have to travel down specifically to see it. Whereas if something is on the television, people up north, in Scotland, wherever, can see it,
Yeah.
So it brings a different kind of notoriety. So yes, the theater journey still continued for you.
Oh yes, very much so. Very much so.
Yeah.
I was able to work with some incredible people. I mean, and one of the highlights for me was working with the late Dr. Jonathan Miller.
Okay.
Who directed me in fact in 3 plays, and he was in a way a sort of a mentor to me as well. First, he cast me in a play called Benito Serrano, which he successfully directed in America.
Right.
And he at the Mermaid Theatre, and it's one of those things where he tried to get the American actor to come over and play the part. And bless Equity at the time, they said no. There are actors. It's one of the few times they said no. There are actors in the UK capable of doing that. And went for the audition, and Jonathan cast me in it. Had fantastic reception from him all through rehearsals and performances. And went from that, he also cast me in as Caliban in The Tempest at the Mermaid Theatre.
All right. Yeah.
And followed that up by inviting me again to do it at the Old Vic. So, and working again with the late Derek Walcott with the Royal Shakespeare Theatre Company in the Odyssey. So yes, the theatre became a source of inspiration and excitement for me during those years between Love Thy Neighbor and where I am today.
Well, so EastEnders comes. How did that come about?
Well, the story is that quite a number of the senior actors, the old established actors, or the names, the so-called names, what happens is that the executive producer and the casting director get together and they decide, they might say, well, we love the work that, let's say, for instance, Rudolph Walker is doing over the years. Wouldn't it be fantastic if they can get him into the series or get him to appear
Right.
And I think that is how it started. So when this came about, of this character, Patrick Truman, it was a case of they inviting me along to meet them, and the rest is history.
Right.
I joined, and can't believe it's 21 years now since I've been in EastEnders.
Exactly. It's over 20 years.
Over 20 years. Yep. Which started off as I think a 6-month contract. But I enjoyed it. I kind of developed the character in a way, I hope, because it seemed to be well appreciated by the general public. And I'm enjoying it. It's challenging at times, but I'm loving every minute of it.
But yes, I mean, you're doing a great job 21 years later, because as you said, it was 6 months, but the way you played it and developed the character and put, Mr. Walker's nuances in the character is what has made Patrick Truman who he is today, 21 years later.
Yeah, I would like to think so. But as I said, there are challenging times. But yeah, it's great.
I don't think challenging times ever disappear. They'll always pop their heads up, regardless which stage of life you're at.
Of course, yes. And I look around at what is happening in the theater today. And the one aspect of it that pleases me no end is to see a number of young actors having gone to America, which is one of the things that it is a reflection on our society, that to be successful now, you have to go as an actor, you have to go to America, make a name for yourself, and then come back. And, you see the evidence of so many actors who, if they had stayed here, it wouldn't have happened. But what I like on top of that is that a lot of them are now doing their own thing, having little production companies, producing their own film. And that is a step in the right direction.
Yes, because if you've got those production companies and directors and writers, whereas before, as you said, you couldn't get parts.
No.
Now, there are more options, there are more opportunities for parts, because they're the little production companies, independent production companies. You're not entirely dependent on the big names, the ITVs and the BBCs,
exactly,
for a series to be written, taken up, or whatever. You've got the little production companies that can put a great production together, writers, directors. So you're absolutely right. It is the right direction that these companies sprout up and grab the bulls by the horns and say, okay, let's create what we're complaining about that we can't get.
Exactly, because you can't depend. I mean, even something like the theater, trying to create your own theater, and I'm disappointed that here we are in 2021 and we don't have our own space.
Yeah.
The late Bernie Grant, I was part of his group who tried desperately to get a theater going in London. The Bernie Grant Centers in nearest, in a way that we've come to having our own theater space. But that's not enough, and it's not good enough.
Yeah. And there have been several little theater companies over the years that lost their funding, et cetera, et cetera. And in some ways you're thinking, well, it's a pity that in 2021, you still have to view things, as much as things in some ways have progressed, but you still have to view things in a way as we need our own space, because things still haven't progressed to the level that they should have, that everybody is included in the space that exists.
Yeah. And in a way, I'm kind of disappointed also that we, as a people, haven't been able to get together and say, you know what, and I don't mean you don't have to be a theater goer, you don't have to be in the arts to say, you know what, as a people in this country, as a people who is contributing a lot to society, that there isn't a group of people who can say, well, look, and they are out there who can say, look, we have several million, we have 1 million, 6 or 7 of us can get together and say, you know what, let us get a piece of land. Let us build what is a fantastic theater, that we can bring all the big musicals from Africa, and we can have a company going that can run parallel with any other company in the country. And this is not to say that you want to isolate yourself. We are still part of the society, but we are part, and yet we are not part of the society.
And that's exactly it. You're part, but you're not quite part. So you can get so far, but as you say, you know, still in 2021, there are opportunities that still aren't open to you. So consequently, you're still thinking in terms of, well, if we had our own company, if we had our own, we would be able to bring the acts in, the artists in, the plays in. We'd be able to write the things and include the people and cast the people that we want to cast. Yeah. Because in what exists, they are not fully recognized still.
Yep. So the areas like that is a huge disappointment and for me.
Yeah, but your tenacity and your practice makes perfect, and your whatever the saying was you said earlier, perseverance works. That's it. It shows. It shows, you know, as I said, I took your example and persevered, and here we are. We've been able to, you know, so it works. But what about the wonderful recognition of being on the honors list and recognized for all that you've done? I see a nice smile come on your face there.
I think, yes. I mean, I appreciate it more because there's so many of my peers who supported that CBE and, you know, lend a hand to seeing that. But, you know, you set off in life just to do the things that you enjoy doing, you know, working in the theater.
And to do it to the best of your ability.
Yeah, or even visiting schools and running a foundation to help youngsters, not just going into the theater, but to give them some self-confidence and build their esteem. And you do these things. I patron of hospice and support the diabetes clinic and prostate cancer and all these things, but I enjoy doing these things. I turn up and I love to see a smile on people's faces, even though times are difficult.
Right.
I do it because I enjoy it, and it's never a problem for me to do this. And yes, if the icing on the cake is that one or two of them say, well, you know what, Rudy, thanks.
Yeah. And you know what? The thanks isn't even necessarily that you're looking for that. The thanks is that you want to see them utilize and use what you've given them or said to them. They don't necessarily have to come back and say, oh, you know, if it wasn't for you, looking for praise, but just for you to stand back and then see them blossom and flourish with what you've told them and what you've given them, the advice you've given them, and the confidence, as you say, that it gives them to face up to the challenges and, you know, at least try. That in itself is thanks and rewarding.
Yeah.
Well, there will have to be a part 2 of this, because I know there's a lot more Rudolph Walker has to talk about and to tell me and to share with the BTM Club and their audience. But for the moment, I'll let you go because I know you're a busy man. And thank you for talking to us.
Well,
absolute inspiration.
Well, it's been an honor. And to all your members, I wish them God's blessing and all the very best.
Thank you very much. And we're still following you. We're still supporting you. And I hope to be at the 90th birthday party. And yes, definitely. Thank you so much. Keep shining and inspiring us all. We're with you and supporting you all the way. It's been a pleasure.
Pleasure.
Thank you. Bye-bye.